The morning sun shone through the large windows of Gate 42 at John F. Kennedy International Airport. People rushed around with their bags and coffee cups. Some checked their phones. Others sat waiting for their flight to be called. It was just another busy Tuesday morning in New York. Victoria Chen stood near the boarding gate in her crisp blue uniform. She had been a flight attendant for 15 years. She knew her job well. She had flown thousands of flights and met thousands of passengers. Today's flight to Los Angeles was just another day at work for her. The gate agent announced that first-class passengers could now board. Victoria smiled and prepared to welcome the passengers onto the plane. She watched as people lined up with their boarding passes ready. A tall man in his late 40s walked toward the gate. He wore an expensive dark blue suit that fit him perfectly. His shoes were polished and shiny. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a small carry-on bag in the other. Everything about him spoke of success and wealth. But Victoria's eyes narrowed as she watched him approach. The man was black. And something in Victoria's mind clicked in a way she would later wish it hadn't. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent with a warm smile. The agent scanned it and nodded. "Welcome aboard, sir. Seat 2A. The man walked down the jet bridge toward the plane. Victoria stood at the aircraft door, greeting passengers as they entered. When the man reached her, she looked at him with a tight smile. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. "Good morning, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" Victoria asked. The man paused for just a moment. He had already shown it to the gate agent. But he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled it out. "Of course," he said calmly. Victoria took the boarding pass and studied it carefully. She looked at it much longer than necessary. Her eyes moved from the pass to the man's face and back again. "Seat 2A, she finally said, handing it back to him. "That's correct," the man replied. His voice was patient, but his eyes showed he understood exactly what was happening. He moved past her and found his seat by the window in the second row. He placed his briefcase in the overhead bin and sat down. He pulled out his phone and began checking his messages. Victoria watched him from the corner of her eye. She busied herself with checking the overhead bins and greeting other passengers, but she kept glancing back at the man in seat 2A. An elderly white couple boarded next. They had first-class tickets, too. Victoria greeted them warmly. "Welcome aboard. Let me help you with those bags." She didn't ask to see their boarding passes. She helped them put their luggage away and made sure they were comfortable. A white businessman in his 30s came next. Victoria smiled brightly. "Good morning." "First class is right this way." Again, no request to see his boarding pass. James Rodriguez, a younger flight attendant, joined Victoria at the front of the plane. He was in his late 20s and had been flying for only 3 years. He admired Victoria and often learned from her experience. But today something felt wrong to him. More passengers boarded. The plane filled up quickly. Victoria continued her duties, but she kept watching the man in seat 2A. He had pulled out a laptop now and was typing away at something. He seemed focused and unbothered. When most passengers were seated, Victoria walked down the aisle checking seatbelts. When she reached row 2, she stopped beside the man. "Excuse me, sir," she said. Her voice had an edge to it. "I need to see your boarding pass again." The man looked up from his laptop. He studied her face for a moment. Other passengers nearby turned to look. "I've already shown it to you," he said quietly. "I understand that, sir, but I need to verify it once more." Victoria held out her hand. The man closed his eyes briefly. He took a slow breath. Then he reached into his jacket pocket again and pulled out the boarding pass. He handed it to Victoria without a word. She examined it again, even more carefully this time. She looked at the seat number. She looked at his face. She looked at the name on the pass. Everything matched perfectly. Of course it did. "Thank you," she said stiffly, handing it back. The man took the pass and put it away. He turned back to his laptop without responding. A young white woman sitting across the aisle in seat 2C had watched the entire exchange. She looked uncomfortable. She glanced at the man with sympathy in her eyes, then looked away quickly when Victoria turned around. James had been watching from the galley. When Victoria returned to the front of the plane, he pulled her aside. "Victoria, what are you doing?" he whispered. "Just checking," Victoria said. She began preparing the drink cart. "You checked his pass twice. You didn't check anyone else's pass even once," James said. His voice was low but concerned. I'm being thorough, Victoria replied. She didn't look at him. With only one passenger? James asked. Victoria finally turned to face him. James, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know when something doesn't feel right. What doesn't feel right? James pressed. Victoria hesitated. She couldn't put it into words. Or maybe she didn't want to. Just trust me, she said finally. James shook his head slightly but said nothing more. He had a bad feeling about where this was heading. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Victoria and James took their positions. The plane pushed back from the gate. As they taxied toward the runway, Victoria found herself looking back at the man in seat 2A one more time. He was staring out the window now. His face was calm but sad. It was the face of someone who had been through this before. Someone who knew exactly what was happening and why. Someone who was tired of it but had learned to stay dignified anyway. The plane lifted into the sky. The flight to Los Angeles would take about 6 hours. Victoria had no idea that these would be the most important 6 hours of her career. She had no idea that her actions today would change her life forever. She had no idea who the man in seat 2A really was. And by the time she found out, it would be far too late to take back what she had done. The plane reached its cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft ding. Passengers began to relax. Some pulled out books and magazines. Others closed their eyes to sleep. A few opened their laptops to work. Victoria and James started preparing the beverage service for first class. They arranged glasses on the cart. They placed bottles of water, juice, and soda in the holders. James reached for the champagne bottle. I'll handle first class, Victoria said quickly. She took the cart from James. James frowned. Are you sure? We usually do it together. I've got it, Victoria insisted. She pushed the cart down the aisle before James could argue. She started at row 1. A white couple sat there. The woman wore pearls and an elegant dress. Good morning, Victoria said brightly. Can I offer you some champagne? We have a lovely vintage today. That would be wonderful, the woman said with a smile. Victoria poured 2 glasses carefully. She handed them over with a warm smile. Enjoy, and please let me know if you need anything at all. She moved to row 2. The young white woman in seat 2C looked up from her book. Would you like something to drink? Victoria asked pleasantly. Just water, please, the woman said. Victoria poured her a glass and moved to the other side of the aisle. The man sat there working on his laptop. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. He seemed deep in concentration. Victoria stood beside him but didn't speak right away. She waited. The man sensed her presence and looked up. Yes? He asked politely. Something to drink? Victoria's voice had none of the warmth she had used with the other passengers. Champagne, please, the man said. Victoria hesitated. Her hand hovered over the champagne bottle. Then she reached for a smaller bottle instead. We also have sparkling water. Or perhaps you'd prefer a soft drink. The man's eyes widened slightly. He understood what she was suggesting. The expensive champagne was for other passengers. Not for him, I asked for champagne, he said calmly. His voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath it. Several passengers nearby turned to look. The young woman in 2C put down her book. A businessman in row 3 leaned forward to hear better. Victoria's face flushed. She had been caught in her prejudice. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Of course, sir. I just thought you might prefer something else. She poured a small amount of champagne into a glass, much less than she had given the other passengers. The man looked at the half-filled glass. He looked at Victoria. He said nothing. He simply took the glass and turned back to his laptop. Victoria moved on quickly. Her heart pounded. She could feel eyes on her back. She knew others had noticed. But she told herself she was just doing her job. She was just being careful. She was just following her instincts. An hour into the flight, the man reclined his seat. First-class seats could recline quite far back. They were designed for comfort on long flights. Every other first-class passenger had reclined their seat. No one had said anything to them. But Victoria happened to be walking past when the man reclined his. She stopped immediately. Excuse me, sir, she said sharply. The man opened his eyes. Yes? Are you sure you're supposed to be in this seat? Victoria asked. The silence that followed was heavy. Other passengers stared openly now. The young woman in 2C put her hand over her mouth in shock. The man sat up slowly. He looked directly at Victoria. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. Every word was measured. I have shown you my boarding pass twice. This is my assigned seat. I paid for this seat. I have every right to be here. I'm just checking, Victoria said, but her voice wavered now. No, the man said. You're not just checking, you know exactly what you're doing. And so do I. Victoria felt heat rise in her face. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to explain. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down in a place she didn't want to look, she knew he was right. I apologize if you feel, she began. If I feel, the man interrupted. His voice remained calm but firm. This isn't about my feelings. This is about your actions. Victoria turned and walked away quickly. She retreated to the galley at the front of the plane. Her hand shook as she gripped the counter. James was there, preparing snacks. He looked at her face and knew something had happened. Victoria? He's being difficult, Victoria said. She kept her voice low. Who? The passenger in 2A? James asked. Yes. He's making a big deal out of nothing. James set down the bag of pretzels he was holding. Victoria, I've been watching. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just sitting there. You're the one who keeps bothering him. I'm doing my job, Victoria snapped. No, James said. He looked her in the eye. You're treating him differently than everyone else. And we both know why. What's that supposed to mean? Victoria's voice rose slightly. You know exactly what it means, James said. You've checked his boarding pass twice. You questioned whether he should have champagne. You asked if he was in the right seat. You haven't done any of that to the white passengers. That's not fair, Victoria protested. I have instincts. I've been doing this a long time. Something feels off about him. What feels off? James pressed. Tell me. What has he done that seems suspicious? Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because the man had done nothing wrong. Nothing at all. He had been polite. He had been patient. He had followed every rule. The only thing off about him was the color of his skin. And she couldn't say that out loud. I just think something isn't right, she finally mumbled. James shook his head. You need to stop, Victoria. This isn't okay. You're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to get the airline in trouble. He won't complain, Victoria said. He seems like the type who doesn't make waves. That's not the point. James's whisper was urgent now. The point is that you're discriminating against him. Can't you see that? Victoria turned away. You're young. You don't understand. After 15 years, you develop a sense for these things. A sense for what? For who belongs in first class? James asked. That's not a sense, Victoria. That's bias. That's prejudice, Victoria's jaw tightened. I don't have to listen to this. Yes, you do, James said. Because if you don't stop, you're going to regret it. But Victoria wasn't listening anymore. She picked up the trash bag and walked down the aisle to collect garbage from passengers. When she reached row 2, she pointedly avoided looking at the man. But she could feel him watching her. The man had heard the conversation in the galley. The plane wasn't that big. The galley wasn't that far away. He had heard every word. His hands had stopped typing on his laptop. He stared at the screen without seeing it. He had been through this before. Many times. In restaurants. In stores. In hotels. And yes, on airplanes. He had learned to stay calm. He had learned to remain dignified. He had learned that anger would only make things worse. So he stayed quiet and waited for it to pass. But it always hurt. Every single time it hurt. The young woman in 2C caught his eye. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." The man gave her a small, sad smile and nodded. Then he closed his laptop and looked out the window. Below, clouds stretched out like a white ocean. The plane flew high above the world. Up here, everything looked peaceful, simple, clean. But inside the plane, invisible lines were being drawn. Lines that would soon become visible to everyone. Lines that would change lives. Lines that Victoria had drawn herself without even realizing the consequences. The flight was only half over, and things were about to get much worse before they got better. 3 hours into the flight, James could no longer stay quiet. He watched Victoria walk past the man in seat 2A for the 10th time. She glanced at him each time like she was watching a suspect. Like he might do something wrong at any moment. It made James sick to his stomach. The lunch service had just finished. Most passengers were full and content. Some watched movies on their screens. Others napped with blankets pulled up to their chins. The cabin was peaceful and quiet. James caught Victoria's arm as she passed him in the galley. "We need to talk," he said in a low voice. "We're working," Victoria replied. She tried to pull away. "This can't wait," James insisted. He nodded toward the back galley where they could have more privacy. 5 minutes, Victoria sighed but followed him. They squeezed into the small space at the back of the plane. The galley was tiny. They had to stand close together. The hum of the engines surrounded them. "What is it?" Victoria asked. Her arms crossed defensively. James took a breath. He had to choose his words carefully. Victoria was his senior. She had trained him when he first started. He respected her experience. But what she was doing today was wrong. Dead wrong. "You need to stop treating that passenger differently," James said. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria said, but her eyes wouldn't meet his. "Yes, you do," James pressed. "The man in 2A. You've been watching him constantly. You've questioned him repeatedly. You've treated him with suspicion from the moment he boarded, and he's done nothing wrong." "I'm just being thorough," Victoria said. Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "No," James said firmly. "You're being discriminatory. And I think you know it." Victoria's face flushed red. "How dare you accuse me of that?" "I treat all passengers equally, do you?" James asked. He pulled out his phone. He had been keeping notes throughout the flight. "You checked his boarding pass twice. You didn't check any other first-class passenger's boarding pass at all. You hesitated to give him champagne. You gave him half as much as everyone else. You questioned whether he was in the right seat. You've walked past his row at least 15 times. You've only walked past other rows 3 or 4 times each." Victoria stared at the phone in James's hand. Seeing the facts written down made them impossible to deny. But she still tried. "I have my reasons," she said weakly. "What reasons?" James demanded. "Tell me one legitimate reason for treating him that way." Victoria's mouth opened and closed. She searched for words. "Any words? He just... Something about him seems... What? Wrong? Suspicious? Out of place?" James finished for her. "Why, Victoria? Why does he seem that way to you?" "I don't know. It's just a feeling." Victoria's voice rose in frustration. "Is it because he's black?" James asked directly. The question hung in the air between them. "No!" Victoria said immediately. "I'm not racist. I've never been racist." "Then why?" James asked again. "What has he done that makes you suspicious? Has he been rude?" "No," Victoria admitted. "Has he broken any rules?" "No." "Has he caused any problems?" "No." "Has he done anything different than any other first-class passenger?" Victoria was silent. Because the answer was no. The man had done absolutely nothing wrong. He had been quiet, polite, and respectful. He had minded his own business. The only thing different about him was his skin color. "You can't answer because there is no answer," James said gently now. "He's done nothing wrong. You're treating him differently for one reason only, and you need to admit that to yourself." Tears suddenly sprang to Victoria's eyes. She blinked them back angrily. "I'm not a bad person," she whispered. "I know you're not," James said. "But good people can do bad things. Good people can have biases they don't even realize. That's what's happening here. You've let prejudice guide your actions today, and it's not too late to stop. What do you want me to do?" Victoria asked. She sounded tired now. Defeated. "Leave him alone," James said simply. "Stop watching him. Stop questioning him. Treat him like you treat every other passenger. With respect. With kindness. That's all?" Victoria nodded slowly. She wiped at her eyes. "Okay," she said quietly. "Good," James said. He started to turn away, but Victoria grabbed his arm. "James, do you think he's noticed? Do you think he knows?" Her voice was small, afraid. James looked at her with sad eyes. "Victoria, of course he knows. How could he not know? He's been dealing with this his whole life, probably. He knows exactly what's happening." Victoria felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. She had thought she was being subtle. She had thought she was just doing her job. But of course the man knew. How could he not? Every look, every question, every moment of hesitation had been clear as day to him. "Oh God," Victoria breathed. "What have I done?" "You've treated someone unfairly," James said honestly. "But you can still make the rest of the flight better. You can still do the right thing from here on out." Victoria nodded. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "You're right. I'll do better. They left the back galley and returned to the main cabin. Victoria tried to focus on her other duties. She helped an elderly woman in economy find her reading glasses. She brought extra blankets to a family with small children. She answered call buttons with a smile, but she couldn't help glancing at row 2. The man was reading a book now, a thick medical textbook of some kind. She couldn't see the title from where she stood. Half an hour later, Victoria heard voices from the man's row. She walked over to see what was happening. The young woman in 2C was leaning across the aisle talking to him. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," the woman was saying, "for how you've been treated on this flight. It's not right," the man smiled at her. It was a genuine smile, but tinged with sadness. "Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Does this happen to you a lot?" the woman asked. "More often than I'd like," the man admitted. "But I've learned to handle it with grace. Getting angry doesn't help. It only confirms their prejudices." Victoria stood frozen in the aisle. She was only a few feet away. The man knew she could hear him. Maybe he wanted her to hear him. "You shouldn't have to handle it at all," the woman said passionately. "It's 2025, this shouldn't still be happening." "No, it shouldn't," the man agreed. "But here we are." The woman shook her head in disgust. "I'm going to file a complaint when we land." What she did was wrong. The man's eyes flicked to Victoria. She stood there, her face burning with shame. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he looked back at the young woman. "That's your choice to make," he said, "but I just want to get home. I just want to finish this flight in peace." Victoria felt tears threatening again. She turned and rushed back to the galley. James was there and saw her face. "What happened?" he asked with concern. "He knows," Victoria said. Her voice shook. "I heard him talking to another passenger. He knows exactly what I've been doing. And he's been handling it with grace while I've been—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "While you've been discriminating against him," James finished gently. "Yes, he knows. And he's probably exhausted from it." Victoria sank onto the fold-down seat in the galley. Her 15 years of experience felt worthless now. All her training, all her customer service awards, all her perfect performance reviews meant nothing, because she had revealed an ugly truth about herself today, a truth she hadn't wanted to see. "I need to apologize to him," Victoria said. "Do you think that will help?" James asked carefully. Victoria looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "Think about it from his perspective," James said. "You've harassed him for 3 hours. Now you want him to comfort you by accepting your apology? That's putting more emotional labor on him. Sometimes the best apology is just to stop doing the harmful thing and leave the person alone." Victoria had never thought about it that way. She had always believed that apologizing was the right thing to do. But James was right. An apology would be for her benefit, not the man's. It would make her feel better. It would ease her guilt, but it would force the man to respond, to reassure her, to do more emotional work after she had already put him through so much. "So I do nothing?" Victoria asked. "You leave him in peace," James corrected. "You treat him with quiet respect. You don't bother him again. And you learn from this. You make sure you never treat anyone this way again." Victoria nodded. It felt wrong to not apologize, but she understood the wisdom in James's words. She stood up and looked out at the cabin. The man in 2A had his book open again. His face was calm and composed, but Victoria could now see the weariness in his eyes, the tiredness that came from constantly having to prove you belonged, from constantly being questioned and doubted, from constantly having to be patient and gracious in the face of discrimination. The plane flew on through the blue sky. They still had 2 hours until landing, 2 hours for Victoria to think about what she had done, 2 hours to sit with her shame and guilt, 2 hours that felt like forever. She didn't know that the worst was still to come. She didn't know that her actions were about to have consequences far beyond this single flight. She didn't know that in just a few hours, the whole world would know what she had done. And she didn't know who the man in seat 2A really was. 4 hours into the flight, everything changed in an instant. Victoria was in the back galley sorting through cups and napkins when she heard a woman scream from economy class. "Help! Someone help! My father can't breathe." Victoria's training kicked in immediately. She dropped what she was holding and rushed toward the sound. James was right behind her. Other passengers stood up in their seats trying to see what was happening. In row 28, an elderly man slumped in his seat. His face was gray. His lips had a blue tint. His daughter held his hand and sobbed. "Daddy, please!" "Someone help him." Victoria reached them first. She checked the man's pulse. It was there, but weak and irregular. His breathing was shallow and labored. This was serious. Very serious, sir. Can you hear me? Victoria asked loudly. The man's eyes fluttered but didn't open. James grabbed the intercom phone. His hands shook as he pressed the button. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical emergency. If there is a doctor or medical professional on board, please identify yourself immediately. The words echoed through the cabin. Everyone fell silent. Passengers looked around at each other. Seconds ticked by. No one responded. Victoria's heart pounded. She had basic first aid training, but this was beyond her skills. The man needed real medical help. She looked at James with panic in her eyes. Is there a doctor here? James called out again, his voice more urgent this time. Please, we need medical help. Still nothing. The daughter cried harder. Please, someone help my father. He has a heart condition. Victoria heard movement from the front of the plane. Quick footsteps coming down the aisle. She looked up and her heart sank. It was him, the man from seat 2A. The man she had questioned and doubted and watched all flight long. He was moving fast but calmly through the cabin. His face was focused and serious. He looked like a completely different person than the quiet passenger who had been reading in first class. Victoria's first instinct was terrible. She stepped in front of him without thinking. Sir, please return to your seat. We're handling this. The man looked at her, really looked at her. His eyes were hard now. Move, he said. His voice was quiet, but it had absolute authority in it. Sir, I need you to... Victoria started. I'm a doctor, the man said, cutting her off. Now move aside and let me help this patient. Victoria's mouth fell open. A doctor? She stood frozen for a moment. The man didn't wait for her to process it. He stepped around her and knelt beside the elderly man. James moved out of the way immediately. He shot Victoria a look that said, I told you so, but kept quiet. The doctor's entire demeanor had changed. The patient, quiet man was gone. In his place was someone confident and commanding. Someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Sir, can you hear me? I'm a doctor. I'm here to help you. His voice was calm and reassuring. He took the man's wrist and checked his pulse while looking at his watch. The elderly man's eyes opened slightly. He tried to speak but couldn't get words out. Don't try to talk. Just nod if you can hear me, the doctor said. The man gave a tiny nod. Do you have pain in your chest? Another small nod. Does the pain go down your left arm? Yes, the doctor turned to the daughter. His voice stayed calm despite the urgency of the situation. Does your father have a heart condition? Yes, the daughter gasped through her tears. He has coronary artery disease. He takes medication? It's in his bag. What medication? The doctor asked quickly. Aspirin, nitroglycerin, a beta blocker. The daughter rattled off the names while digging through her father's carry-on bag. Give me the nitroglycerin, the doctor ordered. The daughter handed him a small bottle with shaking hands. The doctor looked at Victoria. His voice was sharp now, professional. I need the medical kit now, and bring me the oxygen tank. Victoria finally snapped out of her frozen state. She ran to the front of the plane where the emergency medical supplies were stored. Her hands fumbled with the latches. She couldn't believe this was happening. She couldn't believe he was a doctor. She grabbed the medical kit and oxygen tank and rushed back. The doctor had already given the patient nitroglycerin under his tongue. He was talking to him in a low, steady voice. You're going to be okay? Just breathe slowly. In and out. That's it. Victoria handed him the supplies. The doctor opened the medical kit quickly and efficiently. He clearly knew exactly what he was looking for. He pulled out a stethoscope and blood pressure cuff. I need you to clear these seats, he told James. Give us room to work. And tell the captain we need to divert to the nearest airport. This man needs a hospital. James nodded and moved to clear the surrounding passengers. He called the cockpit immediately. The doctor listened to the patient's heart and lungs. He checked his blood pressure. He felt his pulse again. His hands moved with practiced expertise. Every movement was sure and confident. His blood pressure is too low, the doctor said. He looked at Victoria. In the medical kit, there should be an IV setup. Get it ready. Victoria dug through the kit with trembling hands. She found the IV supplies and handed them over. The doctor started the IV with smooth precision. He got it in on the first try. He hung the bag on the overhead compartment. This will help stabilize him until we can get him to a hospital. He placed the oxygen mask over the man's face. Breathe deep, sir. The oxygen will help. The elderly man's color already looked a bit better. The blue tint was fading from his lips. His breathing became less labored. The daughter watched in amazement. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you so much. You saved his life." The doctor smiled at her kindly. "He's not out of danger yet, but he's stable for now. Does he have any allergies to medications?" "No, none," the daughter said. "Good." The doctor pulled out a small flashlight and checked the man's pupils. He checked his pulse again. He listened to his heart once more. He was thorough and careful. Victoria stood there watching. She felt like she was in a dream or a nightmare. This man, the man she had treated with such suspicion, was saving someone's life right in front of her. He was calm under pressure. He was skilled. He was competent. He was everything a doctor should be, and she had questioned whether he belonged in first class. She had made him prove over and over that he had a right to be there. The shame burned through her like fire. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are diverting to Denver International Airport due to a medical emergency. We will be landing in approximately 20 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The doctor nodded in approval. He stayed kneeling by the patient, monitoring him constantly. He adjusted the oxygen flow. He checked the IV. He took vital signs every few minutes. A businessman from first class had come back to watch. He looked at the doctor in amazement. "That was incredible. Are you a cardiologist?" The doctor glanced up briefly. "Cardiovascular surgeon, actually. Where do you practice?" The businessman asked. "I have a practice in Los Angeles, but I also work at several hospitals doing complex heart surgeries," the doctor said. He kept his focus on his patient. More passengers were listening now. They leaned over seats to hear. The doctor treating the emergency was becoming a hero in real time. James caught Victoria's eye. She saw disappointment in his face, and something else. Sadness, maybe. He knew what she was feeling. He knew her world was crashing down around her. The doctor continued to work. He talked to his patient in low, reassuring tones. He explained everything he was doing. "Your heart is under stress, but the medication is helping. We'll have you in a proper hospital very soon. You're doing great." The elderly man managed a weak smile behind the oxygen mask. His hand gripped his daughter's hand tightly. The daughter couldn't stop thanking the doctor. "You're an angel," she kept saying. "You're an absolute angel." The doctor just shook his head modestly. "I'm just doing my job." Victoria wanted to disappear. She wanted to melt into the floor. This man, this incredible, skilled, compassionate doctor, she had treated him like a criminal. Like he didn't belong, like he was somehow less than the other passengers, and he had never complained. He had never gotten angry. He had stayed dignified and calm, and when someone needed help, he hadn't hesitated. He had rushed to help despite how he'd been treated. That made it so much worse. As the plane began its descent into Denver, the doctor stayed with his patient. He monitored every breath, every heartbeat. His focus never wavered. His calm never broke. Victoria stood uselessly nearby. James handled the landing preparations. Victoria couldn't do anything but watch the doctor work and feel her shame grow deeper and deeper. The wheels touched down in Denver. The plane taxied quickly to the gate. Paramedics were already waiting. They rushed on board with a stretcher and equipment. The doctor gave them a detailed report. He listed every symptom, every vital sign, every medication given. The paramedics listened carefully and nodded with respect. They could tell they were dealing with a fellow professional who knew his stuff. "Excellent work, doctor," one paramedic said. "You definitely saved his life." They transferred the patient to the stretcher carefully. The daughter gathered their belongings with shaking hands. Before they took him away, she turned to the doctor one more time. "What's your name?" she asked. "Please. I need to know who saved my father's life." The doctor smiled. "It's not important. I'm just glad I could help. Take care of your father. Please," she insisted. "I need to thank you properly." The plane finally landed in Los Angeles 2 hours behind schedule. The California sun shone through the windows as they taxied to the gate. Passengers gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Everyone was tired from the long, eventful flight. Victoria stood at the door ready to say goodbye to passengers. It was part of her job. She always smiled and thanked people for flying with them. Today, the smile felt impossible. James stood beside her. He gave her a look that said, "Stay professional." She nodded slightly. She would get through this. She would do her job. And then she would go home and try to forget this horrible day. The door opened. The jet bridge connected to the plane. And then Victoria saw something that made her stomach drop. A group of airport officials stood waiting at the gate. They wore suits and badges. Behind them were security officers. And behind them were people with cameras. Professional cameras. News cameras, what's going on? Victoria whispered to James. James looked out and his eyes widened. I don't know. But this doesn't look good. The passengers began filing off. They thanked Victoria automatically as they passed. She responded automatically. Her brain felt numb. The businessman from first class who had watched the medical emergency stopped. Thank you for the flight. That doctor in 2A was remarkable. Do you know who he is? No, Victoria admitted quietly. You should look him up, the businessman said with a knowing smile. Then he walked off. More passengers left. The young woman from 2C stopped in front of Victoria. Her eyes were cold. I'm filing a complaint, she said clearly. What you did to that man was disgraceful, and I have video of some of it. Victoria's heart stopped. Video? Yes, video. The woman held up her phone. I started recording after the second time you checked his boarding pass. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The world needs to know how you treated him. She walked off before Victoria could respond. Victoria felt dizzy. Video. There was video of her actions. Her mind raced through everything she had done. Everything she had said. All of it caught on camera. Stay calm, James whispered. Just breathe. Finally, the man from 2A stood. He gathered his briefcase and carry-on bag. He walked down the aisle with quiet dignity. When he reached the door, he paused. Victoria couldn't meet his eyes. She stared at the floor. Thank you for the flight, he said politely. His voice held no anger. No bitterness. Just weariness. Sir, Victoria started. But what could she say? Sorry seemed too small. Too meaningless. The man waited for a moment. When she didn't continue, he simply nodded and stepped off the plane. The moment he entered the terminal, everything changed. The airport officials rushed forward. A woman in an expensive suit reached him first. Dr. Williams, welcome to Los Angeles. We're so honored to have you flying through our airport. Dr. Williams. His name was Dr. Williams. Victoria's mind raced. Why did that name sound familiar? Another official shook his hand enthusiastically. Doctor, we heard about the medical emergency. We're so grateful you were on board. You saved that man's life. The cameras started clicking. Photographers called out, Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams, look this way, please. Victoria stood frozen in the doorway watching. James stood beside her, equally stunned. A news reporter with a microphone pushed forward. Dr. Williams, Lisa Chen from Channel 7 News. Can we get a statement about the incident on the flight? Dr. Williams smiled politely but held up his hand. I'm sorry, I don't really want to talk about it. I just want to get home. Any doctor would have done the same thing. But you're being too modest. Another reporter called out. You pioneered the Williams method for coronary bypass surgery. You've saved thousands of lives. Can you tell us about your new research? Victoria's legs felt weak. The Williams method. She had heard of that. Even she, with no medical knowledge, had heard of that. It was a revolutionary surgery technique. She had seen it on the news. An official from the airport stepped forward with a bouquet of flowers. Dr. Williams, on behalf of Los Angeles International Airport, we want to thank you for your service to medicine and for your quick action today. Dr. Williams accepted the flowers with grace. That's very kind. Thank you. More officials crowded around him. Victoria could hear fragments of their conversation. Your donation of $15 million to build the new cardiac wing at Cedars-Sinai. Honored with the Presidential Medal, youngest doctor ever to receive the Nobel Prize nomination. For, sir, your foundation that provides free heart surgeries to children. And each word hit Victoria like a punch. This wasn't just any doctor. This was the Dr. Williams, one of the most famous and respected surgeons in the world. A man who had revolutionized cardiac surgery. A man who had saved thousands of lives. A man who had donated millions to charity, and she had treated him like a criminal. James gripped her arm. Victoria, that's Dr. Jonathan Williams. Oh my God, do you know who that is? Victoria couldn't speak. She could only stare. A man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd. He hugged Dr. Williams warmly. "John, good to see you." "The car is waiting." "Thanks, Richard," Dr. Williams said. He looked tired but maintained his composure. "How was the flight?" Richard asked. Dr. Williams paused. His eyes flickered back toward the plane. Toward Victoria. "It was educational," he said carefully. The cameras kept flashing. Reporters kept calling questions. More airport officials wanted to shake his hand. Dr. Williams handled it all with patience and grace. He posed for a few photos. He answered a couple of questions about the medical emergency. He thanked everyone for their kindness, but he never mentioned Victoria. He never complained about how he was treated. He never said a word about the discrimination he had faced. Finally, his assistant cleared a path and they began walking toward the exit. The crowd followed them like he was a celebrity, which Victoria realized he was. He was famous, respected, important, and she had questioned whether he belonged in first class. The last passengers filed off the plane. The cleaning crew waited to come on board. Victoria and James were supposed to prepare the plane for the return flight. But Victoria couldn't move. "I treated Dr. Jonathan Williams like a criminal," she whispered. "One of the most respected doctors in the world. A man who has saved thousands of lives. A man who just saved someone on my flight. And I treated him like he didn't belong." James said nothing. What could he say? Victoria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. It was a text from her supervisor. "Victoria, call me immediately. It's urgent." Her stomach turned to ice. They knew. Somehow they already knew. She stepped into the galley and called her supervisor with trembling fingers. He answered on the first ring. "Victoria, we have a serious problem." His voice was hard. "Sir, I can explain. Can you explain why there's a video going viral on social media showing you repeatedly harassing Dr. Jonathan Williams on Flight 447? The world seemed to tilt. "Viral? It has 3 million views already. And it's been posted for less than 30 minutes. The passenger who took it tagged our airline. The comments are, Victoria, they're calling for your termination. They're calling for a boycott of our airline. The PR department is in crisis mode." Victoria couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. "Sir, I didn't know who he was. That's your defense?" Her supervisor's voice rose in anger. "You didn't know he was famous, so it's okay that you discriminated against him?" "Victoria, what you did was wrong regardless of who he was. But the fact that you did it to Dr. Jonathan Williams, one of the most respected men in America, a man who has saved countless lives, a man who literally saved a passenger on your flight today. Do you understand how bad this looks?" Tears poured down Victoria's face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I need you to come to the office tomorrow morning at 8. Don't talk to any reporters. Don't post anything on social media. Don't do anything. Just come to the office. HR will be there." He hung up. Victoria stood there holding her phone, tears streaming down her face. James appeared in the galley doorway. He held his phone. His face was pale. "Victoria, you need to see this." He turned his phone toward her. The video was playing. She watched herself question Dr. Williams about his boarding pass. She watched herself hesitate to give him champagne. She watched herself ask if he was in the right seat. The camera angle was perfect. You could see everything. Her suspicion, her discrimination, her prejudice. The comments below the video were brutal. "This is disgusting. That flight attendant should be fired immediately. Dr. Williams has saved thousands of lives. And this is how he's treated?" Racism is alive and well in 2025. "I'm never flying this airline again. She needs to be held accountable." James turned off the phone. "It's everywhere, Victoria. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. The news channels are picking it up. You're trending nationally." Victoria sank onto the fold-down seat. Her career was over. Her reputation was destroyed. Her life as she knew it was finished, and she had done it to herself. All because of prejudice she didn't even want to admit she had. All because she saw a successful black man and assumed he didn't belong. All because she let bias guide her actions instead of treating him like a human being. Outside the plane, somewhere in the terminal, Dr. Jonathan Williams was heading home. He was probably used to this kind of treatment. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling while her phone buzzed constantly on the nightstand. Text messages, emails, notifications. She finally turned it off completely, but it didn't help. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the day. By morning, the video had been viewed over 20 million times. It was on every news channel. Social media was on fire with outrage. The hashtag Demand Better was trending worldwide. Victoria got dressed slowly. She put on her favorite professional outfit, a navy blue dress with matching shoes. She did her makeup carefully, trying to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. The drive to the airline headquarters felt like driving to her own execution. Every red light was torture. Every mile was agony. She kept the radio off. She couldn't bear to hear her name on the news. When she arrived at the building, reporters were camped outside. They had cameras and microphones ready. The moment she pulled into the parking lot, they swarmed. "Victoria Chen, do you have any comment? Why did you target Dr. Williams? Do you have prejudice against black passengers? Are you sorry for what you did?" Victoria put her head down and rushed toward the entrance. Security guards helped push the reporters back. Their camera flashes blinded her. Their questions felt like attacks. She made it inside and the heavy glass doors closed behind her, muffling the noise. Her hands shook as she rode the elevator to the 5th floor. The Human Resources Department. She had been here before for training sessions and award ceremonies. She had never imagined she would be here for this. The receptionist wouldn't meet her eyes. "Conference room B," she said quietly. "They're waiting for you." Victoria walked down the hallway on legs that felt like rubber. Other employees stopped talking when they saw her. Some whispered behind their hands. Others just stared. Everyone knew. Of course everyone knew. She reached the conference room and knocked softly. A voice called, "Come in." Inside, 5 people sat around a large table. Her supervisor, Mark Chen, sat at the head. Next to him was the head of Human Resources, Patricia Moore. Then the airline's lawyer, David Kim. The director of public relations, Sarah Johnson. And finally, the airline's CEO, Robert Matthews, the CEO. Victoria's heart sank even deeper. This was worse than she thought. "Sit down, Victoria," Mark said. His voice was flat and cold. Victoria sat. She folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. Patricia opened a folder and pulled out papers. "Victoria, you've been employed with this airline for 15 years. Your record has been exemplary. You've received multiple awards for customer service. You've had no complaints filed against you. Until yesterday." She pushed the papers across the table. Victoria didn't need to look at them to know what they were. "These are copies of the complaints we've received. In the last 18 hours, we've had over 50,000 complaints specifically about your treatment of Dr. Jonathan Williams. We've had threats of boycotts. We've had major corporate clients threatening to pull their contracts. The damage to our brand is severe." Sarah, the PR director, leaned forward. "The video has been viewed 43 million times as of this morning. It's been covered by every major news outlet. We've been trending on social media for 16 hours straight. Celebrities are condemning us. Civil rights organizations are demanding action. This has become a national story," the lawyer spoke next. "We've also been contacted by Dr. Williams's representatives. They want to make it clear that Dr. Williams himself has not filed any complaint and has not requested any action be taken. He has refused all interview requests about the incident. However, that doesn't change the legal exposure this has created for the company." CEO Matthews finally spoke. His voice was tired and disappointed. "Victoria, I've watched that video a dozen times. I've read the statements from other passengers. I've reviewed the incident reports. What I saw was clear discrimination, a pattern of harassment against a passenger based solely on his race. That is not who we are as a company. That is not what we stand for, and we cannot tolerate it." Victoria wanted to defend herself. She wanted to explain. But what explanation could she possibly give? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Do you have anything to say?" Patricia asked. Victoria took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize what I was doing in the moment. I let my biases control my actions. I treated Dr. Williams terribly, and I have no excuse for it. I'm ashamed. I'm horrified by my own behavior. And I understand if you need to fire me." Mark shook his head. "It's not about if we need to fire you, Victoria. We have no choice. The public is demanding it. Our shareholders are demanding it. Our employees are demanding it. Your actions have caused immeasurable harm to this company's reputation." Patricia slid a document across the table. "This is your termination agreement. You are being dismissed for violation of our discrimination policy and our code of conduct. Your employment ends immediately. You will receive 2 weeks severance pay. Your benefits will end at the end of the month. You are required to return your uniform, identification, and all company property by the end of the week. Victoria stared at the document. 15 years of service ended just like that. She had known it was coming, but seeing it in writing made it real. We're also issuing a public statement, Sarah said. She read from her tablet. We at Pacific Airlines condemn discrimination in all forms. The behavior displayed by former employee Victoria Chen does not reflect our values or our commitment to treating all passengers with respect and dignity. Ms. Chen is no longer employed by Pacific Airlines. We are implementing additional training for all staff and reviewing our policies to ensure this never happens again. We apologize to Dr. Williams and all passengers who witnessed this incident. Former employee. The words hit Victoria like a slap. The CEO stood up. Victoria, I want you to understand something. What you did didn't just hurt Dr. Williams, it hurt every employee of this airline. It hurt every passenger who flies with us. It hurt our reputation that we've spent decades building. And worst of all, it reinforced harmful stereotypes and discrimination that people of color face every single day. Your actions have consequences far beyond just losing your job. He walked out of the room. The meeting was over. Victoria signed the termination papers with a shaking hand. She handed over her badge and her employee ID. Patricia gave her a box to clean out her locker. Security will escort you out, Mark said quietly. He looked sad but firm. I'm sorry it came to this, Victoria. I really am. Victoria walked to the locker room with a security guard following behind her. She opened her locker and looked at 15 years of memories. Photos of coworkers, birthday cards, her favorite coffee mug, her backup uniform, awards and certificates. She put it all in the box mechanically. Other employees who were there quickly left. No one wanted to be seen with her. No one wanted to be associated with the racist flight attendant from the viral video. The security guard walked her back through the building. This time she had to exit through a side door to avoid the reporters. But somehow they found out. Cameras appeared from nowhere. Victoria, have you spoken to Dr. Williams? Are you a racist, Victoria? How do you feel about being fired? What do you want to say to Dr. Williams? Victoria kept her head down and walked to her car. She put the box in the back seat and drove away from the airline headquarters for the last time. She didn't go home. She couldn't face her empty apartment yet. Instead, she drove to a park and sat in her car. She finally turned her phone back on. The messages were overwhelming. Friends asking if she was okay. Family members who had seen the news. Former coworkers sending supportive messages but also asking her to not contact them anymore. And strangers. So many messages from strangers. Most of them were hateful. Some were threatening. One message caught her eye. It was from James. I'm sorry about what happened. I hope you understand why I couldn't defend you. What you did was wrong, but I also hope you learn from this and become better. Good luck, Victoria. She appreciated his honesty. He was right. What she did was wrong, and he couldn't defend her actions even if he felt sorry for her. Victoria opened her laptop. She typed Dr. Jonathan Williams into the search engine. She needed to know who he really was. She needed to understand the full weight of what she had done. The results filled her screen. Pages and pages about his accomplishments. Dr. Williams had graduated from Harvard Medical School at the top of his class. He had completed his residency at Johns Hopkins. He had pioneered a new surgical technique that reduced mortality rates in complex heart surgeries by 40%. He had performed over 3,000 successful heart surgeries. He had saved countless lives. But it wasn't just his medical achievements. He had also founded a nonprofit that provided free heart surgeries to children in developing countries. He had donated over $30 million to various charities. He had funded scholarships for minority students pursuing medical degrees. He had built a free clinic in an underserved neighborhood in Los Angeles. He had been honored by 3 presidents. He had received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He had been nominated for the Nobel Prize in Medicine. He was a member of the National Academy of Medicine. He had written 2 best-selling books about health and wellness, and he did all of this while facing discrimination. Victoria found articles where he had spoken about racism in medicine, about being questioned by security at hospitals where he worked, about patients refusing to let him treat them because of his race, about constantly having to prove himself despite his credentials. One quote stood out to her. In an interview from 2 years ago, Dr. Williams had said, "I don't perform surgery to be famous or to be respected. I do it because every life is valuable. I treat the patient in front of me with everything I have, regardless of whether they respect me or not. Because that's what being a doctor means." Victoria closed her laptop and put her head on the steering wheel. She sobbed, deep, painful sobs that shook her whole body. This man, this incredible, accomplished, compassionate man, had faced her discrimination with grace. He had stayed calm. He had been polite. And then when someone needed help, he had rushed to save their life without hesitation. Even after how she treated him, she had tried to write him an apology letter a dozen times, but every version felt hollow and selfish. What could she possibly say that would matter? "Sorry I was racist. Sorry I judged you by your skin color. Sorry I didn't see your humanity." The airline had said he wasn't pursuing any action against her.
He probably wanted nothing to do with her.
He probably just wanted to move on with his life and forget about the ignorant flight attendant who had harassed him. Victoria drove home eventually. She walked into her apartment and saw her uniform hanging in the closet. She had been so proud of that uniform once. She had worn it with honor. Now it just reminded her of her shame. She turned on the television. The story was still everywhere. A panel of experts on a news show discussed discrimination in the airline industry. They showed the video again. Victoria watched herself on screen and felt sick. "This is a teachable moment," one expert said. "This shows how implicit bias affects real people in real situations." Victoria Chen may not think of herself as racist, but her actions were discriminatory. And we need to have honest conversations about how prejudice manifests in everyday life. The television host turned to another guest. "Dr. Williams has released a brief statement through his publicist. He says, quote, 'I hope this incident leads to meaningful change. Not just punishment, but education. We need to understand why these biases exist and work together to overcome them. I bear no ill will toward anyone involved.'" Unquote. That's remarkable grace from someone who was treated so poorly. Victoria turned off the television. Even in his statement, Dr. Williams was compassionate. He was calling for education rather than punishment. He was taking the high road, and Victoria was left sitting in her dark apartment unemployed and disgraced, knowing that she had destroyed her own life because of prejudice she didn't want to admit she had. The consequences of her actions were crushing. But somehow knowing that she deserved every bit of it made it hurt even more. 3 months passed. Victoria's life had changed completely. She couldn't find work. Every airline she applied to rejected her application immediately. Her name was famous now, but for all the wrong reasons. A simple Google search brought up the video and hundreds of articles about her actions. No company wanted to hire someone with that kind of reputation. She had burned through her small savings account. Her unemployment benefits weren't enough to cover her rent. She had to move out of her nice apartment and into a small studio in a cheaper part of town. Her social life disappeared. Friends stopped calling. They said they understood, but their voices said otherwise. They were embarrassed to be associated with her. Family members gave her lectures about her behavior, and then stopped reaching out. Her phone went from buzzing constantly to being silent for days at a time. The hate mail continued. Anonymous people sent her messages every day telling her she was terrible, that she was racist, that she deserved to suffer. Some messages were worse. Some were threats. She had to report several to the police, but the hardest part was the silence from Dr. Williams. Victoria had tried to reach out to him through every channel she could find. She contacted his office. She sent letters to the hospital where he worked. She tried to reach his publicist. Every attempt was politely but firmly rejected. Dr. Williams appreciates your desire to apologize, but he respectfully declines any contact. He wishes you well in your journey but does not want to engage. Thank you for understanding. The same message every time, professional, polite, final. Victoria understood. She truly did. Dr. Williams owed her nothing. She had caused him pain and embarrassment. Why would he want to hear from her? Why would he want to help ease her guilt? He had every right to move on with his life without her in it. But it still hurt. Because she desperately wanted to apologize to his face. She wanted him to know how sorry she was. She wanted him to know that she understood how wrong she had been. She wanted to somehow make it right. But there was no making it right. Some things couldn't be fixed. One evening, Victoria saw a news story on television. Her heart stopped when she saw Dr. Williams on the screen. He was standing in front of a building cutting a red ribbon. Cameras flashed. People applauded. The news anchor spoke over the footage. Dr. Jonathan Williams opened a free medical clinic today in South Central Los Angeles. The clinic will provide free health care to underserved communities, including preventive care, chronic disease management, and mental health services. Dr. Williams personally funded the clinic with a $5 million donation. When asked why he chose to give back in this way, Dr. Williams had this to say. The video cut to Dr. Williams speaking at a podium. He looked the same as he had on the flight. Calm, dignified, composed. I opened this clinic because I believe healthcare is a human right, Dr. Williams said. His voice was clear and strong. Too many people in our communities go without basic medical care because they can't afford it. I've been blessed with success and resources, and I believe it's my responsibility to give back. This clinic will serve everyone regardless of their ability to pay, their background, or their circumstances, because every person deserves compassion. Every person deserves respect. Every person deserves care. The words hit Victoria like a hammer. Every person deserves compassion. Every person deserves respect. He was still preaching those values even after facing discrimination himself. He was still giving to others, still helping, still caring. While she was sitting in her tiny studio apartment, unemployed and ashamed, Dr. Williams was out there saving lives and serving communities. The news story continued. Dr. Williams has also announced a new scholarship program for minority students pursuing careers in medicine. He will be funding full scholarships for 10 students per year, including tuition, books, and living expenses. When asked about recent controversies involving discrimination against him, Dr. Williams declined to comment, saying he prefers to focus on positive change rather than past incidents. Victoria turned off the television. She sat in the dark and cried, not just for herself but for the opportunity she had wasted. She could have met an incredible person that day. She could have had a brief interaction with someone who might have inspired her. Instead, she had shown the worst version of herself. The next day, Victoria made a decision. If she couldn't apologize to Dr. Williams directly, she would try to become better. She would try to make sure no one else made her mistakes. She started volunteering at an organization that provided anti-bias training. She contacted them and offered to speak about her experience. To her surprise, they accepted. The first time she stood in front of a group and told her story was the hardest thing she had ever done. She stood at a podium in a small community center looking at 30 faces staring back at her. My name is Victoria Chen, she began. Her voice shook. You probably know me as the racist flight attendant from the viral video. Some people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded. Everyone knew who she was. I'm here to tell you that I didn't think of myself as racist, Victoria continued. I thought I was a good person. I thought I treated everyone equally. But I was wrong. I had biases I didn't even know were there, and those biases caused me to discriminate against Dr. Jonathan Williams, one of the most accomplished doctors in America, and one of the kindest men I never got to know. She told them the whole story, every detail, every mistake. She didn't hold back. She didn't make excuses. She laid bare her prejudice and her shame. I can't take back what I did, she said. I can't apologize to Dr. Williams because he doesn't want to hear from me, and I respect that. I lost my career. I lost my friends. I lost my reputation, and I deserve all of that. But what I don't want is for anyone else to make the same mistakes I made. She talked about implicit bias, about how prejudice can hide in our blind spots, about how good people can do terrible things if they don't examine their own assumptions. Check yourself, she urged. Ask yourself hard questions. Why did you assume that? Why did you react that way? What biases are guiding your actions? Because if you don't catch them, they will catch you, and the damage you cause might be irreversible. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one person started clapping. Then another. Soon the whole room applauded. Not because she was a hero, but because she had been honest. Because she had owned her mistakes. Because she had shown the ugly truth of prejudice. After the talk, a young black woman approached her. Thank you for sharing that, she said. I experience what Dr. Williams experienced all the time. Being questioned, being doubted, being made to feel like I don't belong. Most people never acknowledge it. The fact that you did means something. Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. I'm so sorry you have to experience that. No one should. No, they shouldn't, the woman agreed. But at least you're trying to change it now. That matters. Victoria began speaking regularly at schools, businesses, and community organizations. She told her story over and over. It never got easier. But she forced herself to do it anyway. Because if even one person heard her story and examined their own biases, maybe some good could come from her terrible mistake. 6 months after the incident, Victoria was walking through a grocery store when she saw it. A television in the electronics section was showing the news, and there was Dr. Williams again. Victoria stopped and watched. Dr. Jonathan Williams has been awarded the Presidential Humanitarian Medal, the news anchor said. President Martinez praised Dr. Williams for his lifetime of service to medicine and his dedication to serving underserved communities. Dr. Williams has saved thousands of lives through his surgical innovations and his charitable work. He accepted the award at a ceremony at the White House yesterday. The video showed Dr. Williams shaking hands with the president. He wore a tuxedo and looked proud but humble. The president said something that made him laugh. The camera flashed. It was a moment of triumph and recognition. Victoria watched with a bittersweet feeling in her chest. She was genuinely happy for him. He deserved every honor and accolade. He was truly remarkable, but she also felt the weight of what could have been. She could have simply treated him with kindness that day. She could have been part of a positive memory for him instead of another instance of discrimination he had to endure with grace. A voice beside her said, "He's incredible, isn't he?" Victoria turned. An elderly man stood next to her watching the same television. "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "He really is. My granddaughter's life was saved by him," the man said. She had a heart defect. Dr. Williams performed the surgery for free through his foundation. She's 7 years old now and perfectly healthy. He's an angel, Victoria smiled. "I'm so glad your granddaughter is okay." The man nodded. The world needs more people like Dr. Williams. People who see past differences and just help people. People who respond to hate with love. People who lead by example. He walked away, leaving Victoria standing there alone. She watched the rest of the news segment. Dr. Williams gave a brief acceptance speech. "I accept this honor not for myself but on behalf of all healthcare workers who dedicate their lives to serving others," he said. "And I accept it with a commitment to continue fighting for equity, justice, and compassion in medicine and in society. We all have a responsibility to lift each other up, to see each other's humanity, to treat each other with dignity. That's not just what being a good doctor means. That's what being a good person means." The apology Victoria would never get to deliver felt heavier than ever. Those words about seeing humanity, about dignity, about compassion were exactly what she had failed to give him. Victoria left the grocery store without buying anything. She walked to her car and sat behind the wheel. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. She had written dozens of apology letters to Dr. Williams. She had deleted them all. But this time she wrote one more. Not to send, just to say what was in her heart. "Dear Dr. Williams," she typed, "I know you'll never read this. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to write it anyway. I am profoundly sorry for how I treated you. I let prejudice guide my actions. I saw your skin color before I saw your humanity. I questioned your right to occupy space that was rightfully yours. I made you prove yourself over and over when you owed me nothing. I failed to see the incredible person in front of me. I failed basic human decency. I have paid consequences for my actions, but nothing compared to the harm I caused you. You responded to my discrimination with grace and dignity. You saved a man's life on that flight even after how I treated you. You continue to save lives and give back to communities and be a force for good in the world. I will never be able to apologize to you in person. But I promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better. I will speak out against bias. I will examine my own prejudices. I will try to make sure no one else treats another human being the way I treated you. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I can do. I hope you continue to receive all the recognition and honor you deserve. I hope your life is full of joy and peace. And I hope you know that one ignorant flight attendant's prejudice does not reflect your worth. You are extraordinary. I'm sorry I was too blind to see it." With deepest regret, Victoria Chen, she saved the note in her phone. She would never send it. But writing it helped somehow. Victoria started her car and drove home to her small studio apartment. She had a speaking engagement at a high school the next day. She would tell her story again. She would warn young people about the dangers of unchecked bias. She would try to create some small amount of good from her terrible mistake. It would never be enough to undo what she had done. She would never get the chance to look Dr. Williams in the eye and apologize. She would never be able to make it right. But she would keep trying anyway, because that's all she could do. Somewhere across the city, Dr. Jonathan Williams was probably at home resting after his award ceremony. Or maybe he was at the hospital performing surgery. Or maybe he was at his free clinic serving patients, living his life, making a difference, being the remarkable person he had always been. He had moved on from that flight. He probably didn't think about it anymore. He had bigger things to focus on, more important work to do. But Victoria would carry that day with her forever. The weight of it would never lift. The regret would never fade. The apology would never be delivered. She had learned a painful lesson about prejudice and humanity. But she had learned it too late. And that was something she would have to live with for the rest of her life. The story didn't have a happy ending. Some stories don't. Some mistakes can't be fixed. Some apologies can't be accepted. Some damage can't be undone. Victoria Chen had discovered this the hardest way possible, and she would spend the rest of her days trying to make peace with it. Too late for redemption, but not too late to try to be better. That would have to be enough.